Hello everyone and welcome to the webinar Talking TIM. My name is Deborah Rouse and I'll be helping facilitate today's webinar. This webinar is sponsored by the Federal Highway Administration in cooperation with the National Operations Center of Excellence, NOCOE. As a quick reminder, if you don't know already, at NOCOE we offer a variety of resources to support the transportation systems management and operations community. On the bottom right side of your screen, you will see a box called Useful Links. You can browse through those links for TISMO resources and news. Previous webinar recordings and case studies related to this topic can be accessed from there. Now I'll cover a few logistics for today's webinar. We are recording this webinar, and the recording, along with the presentation slides, will be available through the on-demand learning section of our website. All the attendees' phones are on listen-only mode by default, but we'd like you to stay engaged by using the question discussion pod for comments and questions. We have a question and answer session at the end of the webinar, so if you have any questions, we encourage all of you to enter them in the questions pod as they come to your mind. The questions will be read out loud one at a time by the moderator, and our presenters will answer each question. So that is all I have, and with that, I'll hand it over to our moderator, Paul Jodoin, to start us off.
Thank you, Deborah, and thank you for to the Center of Excellence for working with Jim and I on this and all the monthly webinars that we hold on the fourth Wednesday of each month. Greetings, everybody. My heart's going pitter-patter with seeing so many old friends there on signing in. It's great to see everybody. I just wanted to, hope everyone's well. Under these conditions, it's sort of a whole new world that we're dealing with, and I'm broadcasting not from Federal Highway headquarters, but in my finished basement and back in Boston. So it's a little different than, but it's something. There's still crashes going on out there. They're more severe than ever because the volume is down. So the work that we do, that you all do, is more important than ever. So very excited to see everyone participating. Just a couple of quick announcements, and I have a few things to talk to you about that I didn't put in slides. The first one is many of you are waiting with bated breath, waiting for the annual TIM self-assessment announcement. And I know you're all excited to hear that it will be postponed until September this year. So the open period, it usually is June 1st through the end of August. This year it's going to be about September 1st through November 15th in that area there. We still feel it's a priority for folks to get together in person when they do the self-assessment. Obviously that's not happening anytime soon, although it may happen, as we may progress into something. We're more likely to be able to do it in person come the fall, so that's why we decided to push it back. We're also continued working on making it a little quicker to be able to complete, so we're doing some work in that area as well. So stay tuned on the announcement, but I know that everyone's interested in hearing that. Today, our last presentation is Jim and I have a contract. It's helping us with marketing and outreach. We feel it's a very important part of our program. So there's going to be a number of poll questions that we're going to move through very quickly because we have a lot to talk about today, a lot of cool presentations, but there'll be poll questions just about after every speaker. So they'll all have to do with marketing and outreach. So your thoughts with that is very much appreciated. So with that, I'm going to move along, introduce our speakers today. Paul, you know Paul, me, and Jim Austrich here is my partner here at Federal Highway. I would normally say partner in crime, but I can't do that because Captain Ron Marone is on with us today talking about the Colorado TIM program. Katie Belmore, which a lot of you folks know, is going to talk about some new opportunities with TIM training data. So, drilling down a little bit more on the data that we get out of the training. training numbers. And then Vishali Shah is our contractor from AEN Corporation, is going to talk about the marketing and outreach program that we have. Next month's Talking Tim webinar is going to be really cool. It's going to be a look into the future with 2 out of the 3 presentations. So we have very honored to be able to have the director from the NTSB in his report on a multi-vehicle crash in Mountain View, California, which would involve a connected and automated vehicle crash. So that'll be interesting. And then the Virginia State Police, Virginia, led by the State Police, have been doing some things with their TIM-related crash data. There's some pretty cool numbers and perspectives to be able to share with you. And then looking again into the future is the connected and automated vehicle and other related research that VTTI has been engaged in under some contracts with the US DOT and others. So looking forward to that. It should be a pretty fun webinar. I did want to talk to you about a webinar that happened last week. I'm involved with actually it was 2 weeks ago, with a crowdsourcing for operations initiative. It's an Everyday Counts initiative, those of you familiar with Everyday Counts, on managing the queues. Now we know managing the back of queues is an important aspect of TIM. All you TIM experts know about that. We have 3 different approaches on managing the back of the queue. Indiana is doing some queue detection through their probe data. It's a real-time tool, so they're able to see where that end of that queue is using the data from their probe data. It shows the queue and then the location where it grows back and forth. And that presentation last week was by Ed Cox, who was probably one of the leading folks in the nation on anything to do with operations data, and he's been a great asset to the crowdsourcing for operations team. The next one is Tennessee. You know, Tennessee is an advanced state with TIM and all things ITS. They have a different perspective with some research, but they're using road sensors and integrating road sensors with Waze to detect the back of the queue. So that's being done by the University of Tennessee and some staff there, some really smart folks there using algorithms. And I'd be fibbing to say I could follow totally how they reach their end of queue results because there's some algorithms and things like that. But they're keeping an eye on the queue, and then there's a whole process in place for identifying the queue. Also, from the world, a lot of you know Brian Purvis is one of our long-standing TIM champions for many years, but good friend of Jim and I. They're using the Waze data. There's a whole presentation on that to be able to identify the end of queue. So I would encourage you to go on to the Center of Excellence crowdsourcing recorded webinars and take a peek at that. And with that, I think we have a poll question that I'm ready for now, Deborah. I'll stop stuttering there for a second. Okay, are you regularly communicating with your TIM trainers? So if you could fill that in for me. No fibs. Everyone's got to tell the truth on these poll questions. Okay. Okay. So many of you are communicating on a weekly and monthly basis, and some on a quarterly basis. Some are not doing it at all, but we understand that. It can be challenging, but maybe we can give you some thoughts on how you better can communicate during today's webinar. So with that, Deborah, we'll go on to Jim. You guys, most of you know my partner in crime here, Jim Austrich, leads many things to do with our team, but he's the leader for the TIM training, the National Responder Training. So with that, we will hand it over to Mr. James Austrich.
Thanks, Paul, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks again for joining us. Before I get started, you heard Paul mention the fact that we're all working remotely from home. He made the comment regarding, I believe it was the crashes and the fact that speeds are up, really. We're seeing, at least around the National Capital Region of D.C., Maryland, Virginia, a lot of, because of the fact that there's truck traffic, a lot of turned over trailers, a lot of truck crashes, turnovers, and just in general, commercial motor vehicle crashes. So something to be aware of, and I'm sure most likely is happening all across the country. I'd like to start out the presentation always with an update on the TIM, Traffic Incident Management Responder Struck by Fatalities. This slide has not changed. I've not updated it. I apologize. I'm showing 14. I know Jack Sullivan and our friend in Arizona now, I can't remember her name.
Angela. Are you kidding me? Angela Bonnet.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry about that, Angela. Angela's a champion in Arizona in her own right in the Towing Recovery Association, and president, I believe, of that association in Arizona. But anyway, there's going to come a time soon, I've said this before, where we're going to have a better handle on not only what the fatalities are, but also injuries. It's important for us, and as Jack has said in the past too, we want to have a one-stop shop place where any agency can go, and it's most likely you see the last bullet down at the bottom, where ResponderSafety.com, Emergency Responder Safety Institute, has taken it upon yourself to be that one-stop shop. So I encourage you to go there, not only to take advantage of the trainings, including the TIM certificate, all their training modules that are free, and thanks to Jack, who's the director of training, and Steve Austin and the entire team. Moving forward here real quick, this is the also the, because of our situation with this pandemic, I think we've said now, and will continue for the near future, that remote training is what we're encouraging states to do. That poll question earlier that Paul posted up regarding communications, we're encouraging you to do that, and you'll see with the presentation that Katie's going to get into a little bit later, and as Paul mentioned as well, a tool to help you better understand and maybe build, on the training in your state. But the National Highway Institute, the Training on for Federal Highway, is still hosting the web-based version also, which is of no charge to you. So I just wanted to show the poster and encourage you to either go to ResponderSafety.com or NHI, share that information with your stakeholders. As of, 2 days ago, here's the national report. It's just amazing. I am just so ecstatic because you've heard me say now for months, we're approaching 500,000, and we're soon to be at 500,000. And I just saying 500,000 to that goal that Paul mentioned, that we have a million, or actually or over 1 million to train, is just so cool to me to be able to say 500,000, and all of you, many others that aren't with us, should be very proud of the accomplishment that this program, saving lives, time and money, and not just responder lives, motorist lives. Here's the usual cadre of maps. This is the train the trainer. States are still leading their own train the trainers. We find out here and there. The Utah one, if anybody's been tracking, there's supposed to be a federal highway collaboration with Utah DOT to do one in Salt Lake City, probably in July, time frame, or later in the summer, depending on the pandemic situation. But we encourage you there. Here's the national map showing the total numbers for training above. In parentheses is the web-based. This morning, Paul Krasavage, actually a dear friend of Paul and I up in Connecticut, who leads the program up in Connecticut, made mention to me that the numbers are for the web-based are going up in his state. So there you have it. There's nothing to be afraid of. We know it's not the greatest way to take the training, but you can always come back to an in-person training at a later date when we're beyond this pandemic. Next is the total train for each state. My gosh, Texas and Virginia and all the states. Well, there's 21 states that are over 45%. You see here in the SIP map, the national goal map, just tremendous work still going on. And we understand, again, this pandemic has really put a damper on our face-to-face, but web-based remote training is the answer for now. And of course, this is the bar chart with the national numbers. This, just as a reminder, coming up in November, we're going to have celebrate the National Traffic Incident Response Awareness Week. I put down there the theme is to be determined. So if anybody has any suggestions, share them with Paul or myself, and we'll consider your suggestions. But it's something that we, and Paul will talk more, and Vishali later during their presentation. As Paul said, we have marketing and communications contract. First time ever. We got to take advantage and spread the word of Tim. Next, well, that's it for me, I believe. Paul.
Yep.
Okay.
Just thank you, sir. We'll be getting back to Jim in a few minutes, but for now, another poll question. With the current pandemic situation, are you promoting the web-based online training? 60% said yes, 13%, 16% no, 50% okay. Keep going, everybody.
Okay.
I think we know, we pretty much know that, I think all the in-person training has been suspended. We know that. We just want to, keep everything on the radar screen for everybody, like Jim, and we encourage you to as a method to keep going, and when we're able to resume the in-person training. The highest and best use of the training, Jim and I both will tell you, is in-person, but you guys all know that anyway.
So anybody, Paul, real quick, there's a lot of no there, almost a third, 28% and not yet. So sorry to harp on this. Please, if you don't know the URLs, whatever you need for us, from Paul and I to share with you to help you, access those training, respondersafety.com or NHI, please let us know. This is important. Please just don't stop training. This is a good option for you. Thanks, Paul.
Excellent. Sure. Okay. The next speaker is, before I introduce the next speaker, actually, is Captain Rob Marone of the Colorado State Police. But I would also just like to mention for a second, there are a lot of good states that are doing, that are good TIM program states, I call them. And a lot of times, I just happen to hear about different activities and different things that are going on in states just in passing. So I encourage you that those of you that are in a leadership position in others, that if you have something going on in your state, I'd like to hear from your state. There's a whole bunch of good states, and I'm seeing some of the leaders right on that in that chat pod. So if you have something to share that we would like to, give you some time on a webinar, we've gone back to a few states over and over again because they have multiple facets to their program. But I know there's several others that we haven't heard from that are all doing very cool things. So with that, Captain Rob Marone from the Colorado State Police.
Thank you, Paul. So my presentation today is to talk about where Colorado's at in regards to the traffic incident management program and how the different leaders across the state are working together. Start with our history. Sadly, over the past 5 years, we've had 5 troopers struck and killed on Colorado roadways. This obviously has caused a lot of reason to look internal, try to figure out what it is that we need to be focusing on, as well as at the state level. This has given us that opportunity, and that's a poor choice of words, but it's given us the cause for change. And it has always been, traffic safety has always been a priority for the Colorado State Patrol. But the big priorities right now are mitigating the risk and limiting our exposure to live traffic, not just for the State Patrol, but for all the partner agencies. And throughout the presentation, you'll hear a lot about all the agencies working together. This is more of a TIM team based presentation, and that's what Colorado is moving towards. After Cody Donahue, trooper, was killed, Governor Hickenlooper requested that CDOT and CSP create a first responder safety traffic task force. The idea behind that was to create and to identify challenges as well as opportunities throughout Colorado for first responders, the situations they face while working, and the idea here is to improve safety and reliability of the transportation system. And that was in 2017. In 2018, the committee was formed and had the first meeting kickoff in the first of the year. This meeting, or this group, this task force, was made up of executive leadership from CSP, CDOT, NHTSA, FHWA, fire, local law enforcement, and the PD level, towing, legal, legislative, and communications partners. So it was a very diverse group that was created to guide the state in traffic incident management. The motto was one scene, one culture saves lives. That was a strong motto just to create the framework of this is something we are all doing together. We're all in it together to create the culture and to create a safe and efficient transportation system. Some of the accomplishments in 2018, I explained the development of the executive committee. There was a safe and quick clearance MOU signed between CDOT and CSP, and that was a real important accomplishment because CDOT and CSP, primarily the two agencies spanning across all the state highways and interstate systems across Colorado. So it was setting the model of having the interagency working together for quick clearance. The strategic plan was developed to give the roadmap for the state. And then another important accomplishment was formation of 3 working groups, and I'll explain those. The first working group is the educational campaign. It is headed up by Chief Doug Fritz. He's a rural fire chief out in Hotchkiss, Colorado. This committee is made up not only from rural partners, but also from urban partners. And the idea behind this is to create consistency in the educational outreach, both internally and externally. And I'll explain a little bit more of some of the accomplishments of that group. There's Policy and Procedure Working Group that is chaired by Mike Halloran. He is a sergeant with Loveland Police Department, which is our urban police department in Colorado. Again, another diverse group that is creating the tools and guidance and guidelines for implementing TIM teams, TIM tactics across the state. The last group is the TIM team working group. This group has a big task. It is simply trying to create and encourage and develop and do everything possible to have functioning TIM teams that are working throughout all the roadway systems in Colorado. And it is another diverse group led by Chief Jerry Rhodes. Some of the highlights. There's a communication plan that's created. I talked about the educational group. They created a plan that it has been rolling out through the state, and I'll explain that in just a minute. TIM website. This is the first time Colorado has had an active TIM website, and it launched last year. TIM conference, it's the 3rd annual. And the TIM team assessments, I'll spend a little time talking about that. TIM team track, so we have a TIM track that was created in 2018, and that is developing out too for resources and training. And then the internal TIM training will be primarily focused on what CSP is doing. Our media event kickoff was in November of 19, and it had 2 themes. It's Together We All Go Home Safe and Safety Starts With Me. I talked about the internal and external components. The internal component is a CSP internal component. The safety starts with me is everything that we are doing. We need to analyze, look closely at our tactics, the way we are operating, the things we are doing to make the roadway systems as efficient and safe as possible. One of the things that the CSP did with this is we created a Safety Starts With Me sticker. And I know it's a simple little concept, but every member is required to display that somewhere, whether you're a comm officer or a trooper working the road, or whatever position you hold, that stickers remind you that safety starts with you first. The external component is Together We Go Home Safe. That went out to the public side of it, advertising move over laws, all the different aspects that the public can help work around the scenes that we are working on. And it also extended out to the partnerships too, of the Together We Go Home Safe initiative. TIM website, I mentioned it's been up for about a year. It is developing and building out. It is going to be a place that we envision will host just about everything that we can to make this institutionalized program in Colorado. And it has a public side of it and then an internal side of it that is developing. The internal is what we're very excited about. This is the area where the TIM teams will have the ability to keep all documents necessary to keep it a running team, keep the communication clear, online after action forms. All these different components are being built in. The idea here is that we want to drive these programs from gold champion base, which we understand that, you lose a champion and you start to lose momentum. And we want to create a place where historical records can be kept, as well as the structure pieces can be maintained, so it does not become, so transition from goal-based to institutionalized. TIM assessments. The interesting thing that is going on in Colorado is every field captain with the CSP has been tasked with standing up a TIM team. A TIM team can be, there's 2 types. There's a corridor base, which has an interstate, and there's an area base that does not have an interstate. But every one of these captains cover, all aspects of the state. So the responsibility lies with the troop captains to form these teams and to ensure that the focus is being led towards the TIM tactics and TIM teams. The map here just highlights where the known teams are that have been working to stand up, and if you look at the map, you can see I-25 and I-70, as well as I-76 is covered. The colors, all those are indicating is just where troops are in alignment with each other. The idea behind this is as we start to assess, those colors will be associated more with maturity, and so we can try to get a really good grasp on, how teams are building out across the state. Technical assistance tour. This is something we started this year. In the past, we would collect information from TIM teams, judging maturity, judging different types of goals that the teams are working on based off self-reporting. Well, the group that met, this initial TIM team working group, decided the best way to do this is to get out in the field and to meet with each team. And it has a small group. It's made up of CDOT, CSP, FHWA, and NHTSA. And the basis of this, again, is to get into the environment and try to understand how does the state help, how does the federal partners help, and how do we build out this infrastructure across the state to create these these mature teams. One of the tools we are utilizing is the FHWA capability maturity model, and we're trying to simplify that somewhat for the teams, but just taking that as the framework to judge the maturity. And the way this plan started, it started in Utah border, the Colorado-Utah border in the Grand Junction area, work its way back to Denver. It's going to go out on I-70 towards the east, and then I-25 will be next in line. We have had a couple hiccups here, obviously not being able to travel around, but this is set to kick off as soon as it already started in Fruita, which is on the Colorado-Utah border, and then it made its way back towards the ski country area. But we will continue that once we get the chance to get back out on the road to do assessments and really just show the support from state level, federal level, and continue to encourage the development of these teams. The conference was held in October. This conference has always been held around the First Responder Safety Week. We've lessons learned last 3 years. Colorado, that's not a great week to hold a conference, so we're going to move it forward this year into one of the wet seasons in September or so to encourage more participation. But you can tell by the pictures, we get a pretty diverse crowd that comes out, and it is well attended, and it was its third year this year. Tim Track was stood up in 2018. It is a self-sufficient track. There's crash cars stored. There's the ability to move them around, set them up for any type of scenarios needed. There's training shelters. There's different resources at the track. It is something that's new this year as far as getting TIM teams to participate with. We're also looking at opportunities to try to extend these type of tracks around the state to, again, encourage TIM teams to train together and to build training scenarios so we can help try to build out the libraries that are going to help everybody throughout the state. The Training Academy, this is specific to CSP, and I think this is important with our agency and our commitment to change culture and to become as a leader as much as possible within the TIM world. We have a three-tiered approach. Basically, there's executive level, mid-level, and such as myself and the captain level, and the boots on the ground. We've committed to that. The first training that was conducted in 2020 was officer candidate schools. These are sergeants waiting to become captains. They went through all the TIM mid-level management type training to include the development of TIM teams and so on. Scenario-based training, this is interesting for us this year. Everybody in the agency, to include the chief, is going through a scenario-based training up at our drive track, setting up scenarios, going through the different timelines on the TIM timeline, T0 through T7, trying to look at decision makings and try to figure out what areas are lacking and need development. But that's just a way that we can put our skills to the test in a safe environment. Communication officer training, same thing. Another critical partner for us is the comm centers. And then the last two bolts are the captains in service and executive command. So just illustrates the commitment from our chief all the way down, and we're trying to model that in-house. The desired end state is fully functional TIM teams across Colorado, on whether it be an area or a corridor. This is the goal. This is what we're working towards, and this is as it says it best here, desired end state. I am finished my presentation. Paul, I'll kick it back to you.
Thank you, Captain. Great presentation. Again, I want to emphasize the great work that Colorado's doing and the work that we are not always aware of. I just happened to be in a conversation with the Federal Highway Division person while you're completing that poll question, which I don't need to read to you. I just wanted to give an accolade to Ever Liddell from our Colorado Federal Highway Division, who I talked to about this, who actually was put together and helped Captain put together this presentation. But Ever is she at Federal Highway Division offices, we have varying levels of participation with the TIM program. champion. She's just like many of us with a passion and interest in contributing to the TIM program. So I just want to thank Eva for that and for continued partnership with that. So back to the questions and then on to the next speaker. So digital news looks like 40%, 41%, 42%. Some are direct mail. Okay, so we see a lot of different opportunities. A lot of folks are doing different things with the marketing and research. So that's great. We'll move on. Just a reminder. Yes, just 1 second, Jim. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, put them in the chat pod. We're going to do questions at the end. Hopefully we'll have time. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just me or everyone, but I could hear you continuously, but it was very, very kind of staticky, choppy. Can you hear me clearly?
I can hear you clearly. It's probably me moving the phone around. My apologies, everybody. My apologies. It won't happen again, I promise you. With that, Jim, let's just go right into introducing Katie.
Yeah, Paul, thanks. You were fine at the beginning. It's just this last few minutes that you were choppy. But anyway, thank you. Before Katie Belmore with HNTB, which is the subcontractor to Battelle, Katie Belmore, as Paul said, most of you know, and extraordinary human being and engineer. She's just been just tremendous over the past 8 years. The keeper of all things TIM data, TIM training data, and I just wanted to preempt her, moving on with her presentation here. That what you're about to see, pay close attention, because Paul and I thought recently in collaboration with Katie, obviously, that we were going to now allow or give you all access to the spreadsheet, the Excel spreadsheet, with I believe it's 15 tabs, if I'm not mistaken, in the workbook. All the data that Katie's been collecting since the beginning of the TIM training, the National TIM Training Program. So the objective here is for all of you to take advantage, more so than ever now, with this information, this data, to arm you and better understand, each state individually. Your own state, obviously, is what you need to take advantage of. Sit down with your TIM stakeholders, your TIM committees, and have discussions on how you can achieve your goals. The population of responders that we saw earlier in the SIT map, that 45% map, that's what the objective is here. And most of you are, I'm sure, very analytical and can slice and dice this in many ways to come up with solutions on, where you need to focus or how you, develop a plan of attack, if you will, here in 2020 and moving forward. So just wanted to get that out there and appreciate, like Paul said, if you have any questions or whatnot, put them in the chat pod or reach out to Katie, myself, or Paul. So with that, Katie Belmore.
Thanks, Jim, for that wonderful introduction. I just want to check real quick. It does sound like we're having a little bit of audio issue, but I want to make sure everybody can see my screen all right.
Looks small.
It's smaller now, but you can see it. Okay. I just wanted to kind of give a quick overview. I think everybody that's been getting the reports over the last X amount of years would be familiar with this PDF I have up here. I know it's too small for you to read, but it basically has 5 pages. And it has this summary page at the beginning, and then we have some state-specific information that's provided, and then again state-specific information related to the progress that's being made towards the goals that everybody set for their state. So obviously this is, like Jim said, this is just a PDF that we send out to everybody. But obviously, this data is coming from somewhere, and that somewhere is this Excel file. And like Jim stated, we've kept this internal up till now, and this is something we're just going to start sharing every 2 weeks, the same way we share the PowerPoint presentation and that same PDF. So I know hopefully this is blown up big enough that you guys can see it. I kind of have to balance having it big enough for you to see for it not being so big I can't really explain what it is. So this, if you recognize, is just actually the first page of that PDF, and it just provides an overall national summary. And that's not going to change. It's just all this information on this first page that you would recognize. Similarly, the second page is just the second page of the PDF. It has a nice summary by state of the train-the-trainer information, the in-person responder training information, the web-based information, so that as a total, and then also your goals and where you are with your goal. So again, this is all very familiar. This is just the Excel file where it comes from. The next one, this one shows how many people have been trained by discipline, and what we have always shown is this kind of total, what your goal is, the total to be trained, and I can zoom in even more here. So we've always given this information of what the goal was set, and then we compare that to how many people have actually been trained, and we just enhance this a little bit to add a percentage. So now you know that in Arizona, your goal is 7,500 people for law enforcement, and you're about 31% there. So we just added this percentage. This will just become part of that standard PDF as well. And then at the end, we also added a total. And this total would be the exact same total that's over here. But we just wanted to make sure if you were trying to look at it, it's all in one place. So this is the standard information that you guys have been seeing. But then we also wanted to give you guys, if we're going to send this Excel sheet out, we wanted to provide a couple other things that were easy ways for people to find additional data about their state. So we made this train by discipline chart. And this is actually provides a drop down. Right now I have Kentucky. You can just drop down and select your state. So let's pick on Florida. And that will update all of the numbers, and then it will also update this chart at the bottom. And one of the things we did with stuff like this is I do have it set up so that if you went and printed, typically we use like a PDF printer, but it's set up so that you can print it and share it. If you wanted to use it at a meeting or a TIM committee or task force meeting, you would be able to easily print it and have it available that way, or cut and paste it into a PowerPoint. So this just gives a little bit of flexibility for each state to have this information specific to them every 2 weeks. And then the other thing I wanted to point out, let me see if I can pick. Sorry, 1 second. So we do have states, and I just wanted to kind of use Montana as an example, because I know that one of the things people are going to say is, but you have the total to be trained, you have how many people are trained, and the remaining to be trained, and these two totals, this adds up to 10,855, not 10,502. And that's correct, right? Because, for example, here in Montana, the transportation, they thought that they needed to train 614. They actually trained 795. So they exceeded that goal. They're beyond that. But that doesn't change the total that needs to be changed for law enforcement, right? So even though you have extra people here, you can't count that against the other disciplines, but you still have progress you need to make towards. So we were looking at this, and I'll probably just add a note in there that explains that for people. But I wanted to point that out. Because sometimes we go over our goal, these two numbers are not going to add up, or add up to the total to be trained. So that's one of the...
Katie?
Yep.
Can you pause a second? We lost the presentation.
Oh.
I think we're going to have to move on to Charlie's presentation because we could hear her loud and clear, and we lost Katie. And unless we get her back in 5 seconds, we'll move on to Charlie Shar is a contractor with us under the Kim systematic contract with ADM Corp. She supports us on several different projects, the Executive Leadership Group, Crowdsourcing for Operations, and helps us with the marketing and outreach as well. So with that, Michelle, why don't we move on, and we'll see if we can get feedback with any time that's left over. So, Michelle?
Thank you, Paul, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to share with you our support for the FHWA TIM program through the lens of marketing, and more broadly, talking about the importance of marketing to strengthen TIM programs. When Dr. Marone was speaking, he talked about having that sticker there amongst all the responder communities, and it's just a sticker, but it makes a tremendous difference in the frame of mind and the focus and attention given to the practice of safe traffic incident management. So just high-level marketing, it's the activity, processes for creating, communicating, delivering, and exchanging offerings that are focused on customer value, clients, partners, and society as a large. But realistically, it boils down to telling an effective story to educate people about the product. And in this case, TIM is a good, critical, and life-saving product, and that's even more important in terms of communicating through marketing efforts and through outreach, the practices, the tools, the technologies, and the behaviors that promote TIM. So in today's presentation, I'm going to give you a little bit of context on how this marketing and outreach effort started, what our current work is, and the third, which is very exciting for me, is to ask everybody on the call today to share feedback and support and help communicate the importance of TIM to the responder community and outside the responder community. So let me go ahead and set the context first. This is a picture that was taken during the November Transportation and Public Safety Summit in Washington, D.C., and that is our Administrator Nason, speaking at the summit. And it just goes to show just the importance that the Federal Highway Administration does place on safety and traffic incident management. So with that in mind, the purpose and the work that we're doing flows from the TIM program goal, which is to continuously improve the safety of responders and road users, the reliability of travel, the efficiency of incident and emergency response through institutionalization of TIM programs. It's a lot. It's high impact, it's high importance, and it's not simple to execute. It requires substantial collaboration among many responder communities, from law enforcement, fire, EMS, towing, all of you on the call today. And so the purpose of marketing and outreach, which many states and agencies are doing quite well. I can give you, for example, Pen Time has wonderful reach and content. Virginia DOT has a pretty impressive website when specific to their TIM program, and many others like Captain Marone. But the value in that is that agencies can, first of all, effectively demonstrate the value of the TIM program and justify funding and support. Through marketing, you can promote coordination amongst responder communities and specific to a given TIM strategy. Raising public awareness of the programs, such as Safety Service Patrol or incentivized towing. And then raising public awareness of and adherence to move over laws. So the question, that we sort of asked coming into this is why TIM marketing now? And there were a number of factors, but one of the most significant was the SHARP 2 funding ended, and we wanted to be able to try to maintain the momentum and take advantage of relationships, guidance, and goodwill that was created to continue the goal of 1 million responders trained. And we want to focus on a few high-impact efforts. This is a graphic that we put together based on the wonderful data from Jim and Katie. It shows, during the 2014-2015 period and 2016, there was a huge growth in the number of responders trained. And then around 2017, we sort of petered a little bit, and again in 2019. And in 2020, we know there are a lot of difficulties given the COVID-19 epidemic, but we want to make sure that we support the responder communities to become trained so that they can help in their communities at large. And so that was one of the main reasons why the marketing and why now. The other challenge was that of competing priorities. We recognize that everyone has limited time and competing priorities. This is probably doubly significant among responder communities such as law enforcement, fire, and EMS. So we need to understand how we can respect their workload and still be able to have them focus on TIM. And we bring this focus through human-centered stories and interviews that balance the why and the statistics to support the why. For example, our first newsletter, which we hope many of you got, highlighted a story by Linda Unruh and Sergeant Bemis, and it goes really to the heart of why it matters, keeping the responder safe, and goes beyond the financial business case. But we want to make sure that we don't create things in isolation, and we want responders to understand that training is a must so they can continue to give to their communities. And the third, I would say, reason, having a little trouble, there we go, forwarding the slide, there we go. The third reason is that now there are more and more users of digital technologies. More often than not, individuals are consuming information in smaller bits through Twitter. They're looking at the news stories through their iPhones or their iPads. So the traditional newspaper or even a large, multi-page email document report just doesn't quite cut it, particularly in this day and age of busy people, busy lives. And so we wanted to try to make use of new digital technologies. So that was sort of the basis for this marketing contract. And this is another image, and this is actually, I'm just so honored to support this task. These are all of the different members of the TIM Executive Leadership Group, which includes International Association of Chiefs of Police, American Public Works Association, Towing and Recovery Association of America, and many others. And so what we're trying to do is to build synergies amongst these associations to better reach responders. So how do we meet the immediate needs? The first thing that we did was put together a quarterly TIM email newsletter. Our first kickoff was with nearly 800 members on the email list and an incredibly high open and click rate. That means people are reading it. And they mostly focused on TIM training, the self-assessments for TIM, and the NHI and FHWA courses, searching for the TIM training courses. We hope to generate this every quarter, and so this will be a way to very quickly consume new information. If you have new information that you'd like to share, we will use this as a platform to share that out. The other new thing that we started doing is developing social media posts. And we would love to be in a position where these posts are then retweeted by the other responder communities. And so you could see, for example, this one, very simple, don't rely on luck in the line of duty. TIM training helps responders clear incidents faster and safer. ask your agency to request training today. So it's a call to action, and then there's a small video or a small photo that speaks very clearly to the message. The other priority we have is updating the FHWA TIM website. We acknowledge that the site is older, and it's based, and part of that is because it's based on an older content management system. So while we wait to transition to the new content management system, we're focusing on immediate needs, refreshing the quality of the content. There's a treasure trove of information here, but it's not easily accessible. And so we're going to try to redesign some of the content and make the things that are most relevant easily accessible up front over the next few months. We also establish a presence on NOCO for TIM. And it's a quick way to access all of the webinars that you guys are coming and listening to, as well as some other tools, for example, TIM performance measures. This link takes you to a site that has many case studies, a lot of guidance on the schemas and data on how to collect TIM data. There's going to be forthcoming more stuff in terms of the training opportunities, as well as currently there are a number of case studies that NOCO has supported. So these are some of the quick efforts, as well as developing strategic collateral, whether it be, you know, 2-page flyers or slide decks. The other big thing that we've been able to do is help develop the broader long-term strategy for outreach and communications. And so as a part of that, we spoke to a number of associations and their outreach arms, and we developed a plan for what we hope to achieve through this work in the next year, and then to update that for years to come. And so the things that are coming up, one of the biggest goals through this marketing is to increase the rate of responder training. And so some of the things that we think about doing is getting write-ups about TIM training and newsletters within partner emails and newsletters, putting op-ed pieces in national magazines that responders look at, and of course directly marketing, you know, to specific, for example, tow operators. Certain states have tow operators lists, and those lists potentially could require in future that training be a requirement for being on the list. So there are things like that that we will be focusing on. We are also trying to work to increase the self-assessment and scores, and in effect increase the capability maturity of responder community and TIM programs. And so some of those are to take a little bit of a deeper dive into the data and identify what agencies may benefit from a little bit of support to help them improve specific aspects of their TIM program. And then the third focus area is actually part of this, improving the monthly Talking TIM webinar series value. And so one of the things that we will try to do is have NOCO conduct a very brief, maybe 5-question survey at the end of webinars that ask specifically about the content that was delivered, what you needed, what was repetitive, what you'd like to see different, and so that we use this platform effectively for those that are listening on a monthly basis. So with that, how can you help? There are a couple of things that we would love to have you help us with. The first one is share with us the compelling stories, the photos, and the best practices that we should highlight. Secondly, help amplify the message. Potentially host a recurring spot in your e-newsletter. One of the other activities I didn't mention, but we did, is we looked at about a dozen different member associations' web presence and tried to identify how TIM training and TIM practices were presented. And so we have some reach back points on, hey, can we get a little more prominence just to make the training more accessible and aware. And then other things in terms of support is, join our newsletter, follow us on social media, and then also share with us whatever you're doing in terms of newsletters or in terms of other campaigns that you're doing, so that if you have a very successful outreach campaign, we want to be able to replicate and share that with other responder communities and TIM programs. So thank you so much. My name is Vaishali. I'm here if you have any questions, as well as our marketing director, Matt Morgan, and then, of course, Paul and Jim. So with that, I'll turn it back to Paul.
Yep, thank you, Vaishali. Yeah, I think it's important. Most of you are TIM experts on the call. I know a lot of you, but many of you are not marketing and outreach experts. And Jim and I finally came to that conclusion a few years ago, and it took us a while to get the contract in place. But really, it helps you. And I think there are a few states that haven't engaged their marketing office that really is helpful. So with that, we're going to try Katie again. I don't want to talk too long because I want to try to get back to Katie, and hopefully the technology is working right this time. And Katie, we can hear you. Let's go.
Yeah.
Continue.
I was going to say, I could hear you the whole time. So
frustrating. I know it's frustrating.
It's all good. It's all good. So, can you hear me all right now with this connection?
Yep, loud and clear. Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so I think everybody got the general understanding of the slide. It just gives you the opportunity to look at the total that you want to have trained, how many have been trained, and who's remaining to be trained by discipline for your state. And then we also did another way to look at things. We put together this map where you can look at the total trained by discipline in percentages. So this one that we typically look at, and this is what's included in the PowerPoint, is just the overall total. Where are you in comparison to your overall training goal? But this also gives the opportunity to look at by the individual disciplines, right? So you can say, here's where we are when we're looking at our goal for law enforcement. Here's where we are for fire and rescue. So it just, again, gives, depending on your audience, if you need some different information, you can use this. And then, again, it's really easy to just copy and paste these into a PowerPoint or use them however you need to use them for the meeting or event that you're hosting. So that's in there. We also have this train by year chart. And again, this is one that has a filter at the top with a drop down. So you can look at the entire country where we're at with the training, and we can see where the progress we've made each year, or you can select your specific state. I'll just go lower. Let's go to Wisconsin. Try that out. And it updates it, and then again, we made sure it updates it in the title of the slide. So again, you could share this however you wanted to share it with people in your state. So those three things, these three different charts, really give you that opportunity to play with the data in already established formats. We have these bar charts, we have the U.S. map. But the other thing I wanted to make sure people understood that they were getting in this spreadsheet is just all of the data. And that's a little dry, but I just want to walk you guys through it real quick. So let's see. Oops, sorry. So we have the train the trainer, and this is just all of the information that is provided in SharePoint. right? So you just copy that data in. It just gives you the location of the Train the Trainer session and how many people were there by discipline, the basic information. And then the next sheet provides a summary by state of just Train the Trainer information. So this spreadsheet is just pulling the data from here and summarizing it by state. Similarly, and this is probably the spreadsheet that people will be most interested in, this provides all of the in-person 4-hour or different versions of the responder in-person training. And again, this gives the state, the county, the city, all of the information that you're entering into SharePoint, as well as who completed the training and what training type it is. So this, and then when I just added simple filters to this. So if you wanted to just look at the information from your state, you can do a quick filter, and then you have all of the data that's ever been entered in SharePoint for Georgia. And I think this, like I said, is probably what the states will want access to the most and be able to use. And once you have this data, you can play with it and create whatever charts, graphs, whatever you need to look at. If you have something very specific, I want to just see what's going on in this one county, you have those kind of filters as well, right? So you have all of this data. And then Ohio's information comes separately, so we just have a spreadsheet for that. And then again, we have a summary sheet by state. So we always have these summary sheets that provide all the data by state. Then we have, for NHI, we just get very basic information, the state, the discipline, and the count. So these are just totals. There's no information as to what year it occurred in. So that's a little bit different. We don't have the same level of data for the online training. And then there's a summary page again. And this summary has, it's a little bit more complicated. It has the national highway information in it. And you'll notice that we have a couple columns here because we had the original version that people will remember, and then there was a recent update, and that's called version A, and it's 2 different sets of data, so they're just separated out that way. And then for those of you that have been with the program for a long time, you'll remember when we first started doing the NHI, they weren't gathering discipline-specific data, right? So all of that data prior to 2016, or prior to this September 30th in 2016, just got lumped in as other because we don't have a way to know which discipline it is. So that's why this one has an extra column in it. And then if you move over, same thing, we have this summary, and this is for the Responder Safety Learning Network, and the total, they do capture the total by discipline, so we have that information here. So that's a lot of data in one spreadsheet for all the online. And then here at the bottom, we're keeping track of a couple states that actually have their own online web-based training version. And I just update that there every 2 weeks. And then the last thing that's in here is just kind of at the end, we wanted to maintain the traditional bar chart that we've been putting in the PowerPoint. So this is just that version of the bar chart. So again, there's a lot of information in here. We'll start sending it out every 2 weeks. That allows you guys to kind of play with it however you want. And if something, gets messed up, in 2 weeks you're going to get the new version that has all of the information in it. So I think that's everything, Jim, unless there was any questions you had. Hopefully everybody could hear me finish that out.
Katie, excellent job. No questions, just a quick apology, but I think everybody, I hope everybody can see the value in what you presented here, the value in all this data, all this incredible work. It's really that, again, that almost 500,000 that we're at, and soon, hopefully, the million plus. So thanks again, Katie. I guess we have, Paul, what do we have, like 12? How many minutes do we have left? 14 minutes?
Yeah, something like that. So there was some questions. I think they've already been answered. So that Jonathan had mentioned about the, how do we get the data? So it's going to be part of the spreadsheet that you've been provided for every 2 weeks. It's just going to be an additional attachment, right, Jim? Is that the way it's working?
Exactly. Yeah. And there'll be a note from us, with when we start sharing the spreadsheet, as Katie said, along with the maps and everything else, the PDF, et cetera. So we'll definitely catch your attention. Go ahead, Katie.
Well, and I was just going to say, so one of the last things we've been working on right now is just a README file at the beginning of this too that kind of summarizes each tab and
there you go.
Through it.
Yeah.
So we'll add that in there because it's too much if you don't know what it is.
Yeah, and another thing too. Thanks, Katie. Another thing that we touched on before, our team here at headquarters, is that we may ask or conduct another webinar specifically for those of you that are intimately involved with your TIM training programs. If you want to partake in that, and we can take a little bit deeper dive. So I got to talk more with Paul about that and see if we do that. We had that thought too. So anyway,
yeah, I would just chime in that one of the interests that we have is is seeing where the gaps are, and so the gaps where you are, and where we're talking a lot lately about local TIM, rural TIM. How do we go to like a next generation, or we drill down further than where we're at? And, much to my chagrin, because I hate data, it really helps understand the picture, see the picture here. And with the training, there's so many ways, if you have someone that's talented at looking at data, there's so many ways to slice and dice and to look at it and to use it to your advantage to advance your program. So I think that Jim and Katie had a great idea for slicing and dicing this further and make it accessible to you. For a long time, we didn't make it accessible because we were afraid someone was going to break SharePoint. But now we making it, I think, more available, I think will be very helpful, I think, to some that like the data.
That's right, Paul. Thanks.
So there was a couple of questions. I do want to go ahead, Katie.
Sorry, I just wanted to make one note too, because I'm not 100% sure we talked about this on the last Talking TIM webinar, and there's some reporting and summary capabilities in SharePoint. However, I think we kind of sent out the word to everybody that we exceeded the capacity of what SharePoint ever thought we would have, right? So we have have started to have to archive the information in SharePoint. So you can no longer go to SharePoint and click some of those summaries and see everything because the data that's been archived isn't there any longer. But it will always be in the spreadsheet that we're sharing, and that will always be on SharePoint as all of the past reports we've ever done are available on SharePoint. So that's another reason we really felt this is important now, because that archiving is removing some of the capabilities of the SharePoint site itself.
Great catch, Katie. Great catch. And can you touch real quick on what we discussed in terms of using the SharePoint counties breakdown, what we hope they, state champions, TIM training champions will do or can do with that?
Yeah, so what we are looking at today is our national report that comes out every 2 weeks, right? But we also have state reports that we're working on that we distribute on a much less frequent basis. We're hoping to do that in about a month to all of the states. And one of the things that we'll have in there Instead of having the U.S. map, we'll have the county map, so that for each individual state, they can select, they can have the map that shows how much training is happening in each county. So that's kind of a next wave enhancement that's happening to the state-specific reports. It would just be way too much information to put in this biweekly report, but it certainly will be very helpful to the states in their individual reports. We hope.
Yes,
Yeah,
thanks,
so,
Katie. Paul, go ahead.
No, one vision that we have is taking the TIM performance measures data and integrating it with the training data. Wouldn't that be cool to be able to identify and see if there's, where the opportunities are, if there are any, or where the improvements have seen, it would be because of or in spite of the training and things like that. So, yeah, that is, into the future, and that's what we hope to do sooner rather than later, actually. But we need some good experts that can do that. So there was some conversation. Dave Hyden is one of the TIM champions out of Arizona, representing the EMS community. He works, he participates on the executive leadership group, and he talked about adjusting the numbers. Now, on the TIM training, we just went through an exercise where we gave the states the option to adjust the numbers. There are some in the EMS community that feels we're not representing them sufficiently, but those aren't Jim's numbers, those aren't Paul's numbers or Katie's numbers. Those are the states that provided their numbers. If you feel in your state you need to adjust your numbers accordingly, Jim may or may not accommodate that. But it's, in the end, it's the numbers are important. We push the numbers so that we have a framework from where to make progress. But it really is just getting to everybody that needs to get the training. So.
Yeah, Paul, that good point, and thanks. Everybody should know the national TIM community that are we here, right? And leaders, many of the leaders at above our pay grades are looking at this data more and more and more and more, and through the Vishali's efforts and her team to support with that marketing contract, we're going to be waving our flag of success. So this is not just us. This is much bigger than us, I guess, is one way to say it. And as Paul and I always say, you should all be super proud of what we're doing here. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, it's been. There's a couple other questions. Rita asked Jim, Katie, do you have the names of all the trainers since the beginning of time in Nevada? Beginning
yes,
of time.
We do. And that's again specific, something that would be in the state-specific report. It's okay. Not available through SharePoint or anything. It's something we've collected separately.
And Vishali, you've been watching the newsletter comments in here. Are we all set? Everyone have a link to the newsletter, everybody?
Yes. Paul, I don't know, do you want to also ask if anyone else wants to share their agency information? We can try to send out some pre-drafted messaging to help promote training. I don't know if you want to.
That last poll question.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so Deborah, could you put up that last poll question? Try it again. Would your agency be willing to share pre-drafted messages to promote TIM? And if so, and if you don't want to put it in the chat pod, you can send me an email off the side. That'll be fine too. But if you
so just type in your email address or your point of contact for outreach, and we can connect with you or the other individual to do this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so anyone that's not getting the newsletter, did you provide that information?
Yeah, I put a link in the chat box, and then we'll also provide a link through the No Code Tim landing page in the coming few days so that it'll be there for anyone who'd like it.
Vishali, Paul, another quick note on the newsletter. I think we have a total of 6, maybe 7 states that have produced newsletters. Florida, FDOT being the most recent one. And I've been remiss in not sharing it. I told Grady Carrick, our dear friend in Florida, retired Florida State Patrol, that I would be sending it out, and I have it on my bar here to send out. But we encourage other states to produce newsletters, digital or physical, and please share them with Vishali, Paul, and myself. It's definitely a good practice, best practice.
Yeah, good point, Jim. Good point.
Virginia does a monthly newsletter. Wisconsin, I think, does a quarterly one. Washington, Oregon, Pennsylvania do quarterly newsletters. So, yeah, there's quite a few.
Maryland. Don't forget Maryland, where you live, Vishali.
I know, but I think theirs is annual.
Oh, that could be. Okay. Okay.
No, I think it's quarterly.
Yeah.
Quarterly.
Millie Hayes, one of our division champions, Federal Highway Division, comments that Texas started one as well. That's excellent. Don't want to leave Texas out. Yep.
Georgia has one.
That's great. I think having one at the national level and having newsletters, at the national level that tie in somehow with the state specific, because we can't cover the state specifically. We still would like to see your best practices. We'd still like to get copies of those newsletters. We love seeing them, and we think it's great. Yeah.
The one associated with the National TIM training program. Katie also produces for us, so we're going to have a lot of newsletters coming out, but there's a new updated version of the National TIM training newsletter that you will be receiving soon as well. So
with that, we're at 2:59. I think we got everything in we wanted to, in spite of some issues here with technology. But thanks everybody for their service, for their partnership and participation. It's great to see so many old friends and good friends and new friends on the chat pod chiming in. Next month's going to be a great webinar as well. So don't make sure you participate, and please be safe, everybody out there. And if, of course, Jim and I are here anytime you have a question or we can help. Jim, any final?
I just wanted to echo that. Thank you. Many of you, I suspect, that are in, working in public health, are also out there on the front lines, taking care of the citizens of this country during this pandemic. So I get chills while I'm telling you this, and sincerely, that another big thank you for all of you that are out there doing that, whether you're law enforcement, fire, rescue, EMS, DOT. It doesn't matter your discipline. I know all of you are great people and deserve a big thank you, big hug. Thank you.
With that, 3 o'clock on the nose, so take care, everybody. Talk to you all soon. Okay, have a good day.